seems like a daunting task to try to find words to do that, but I'll try. I've known Charis since I was 14, coming into high school as a somewhat under-equipped and spineless freshman. And because of Charis, she taught me to first recognize that I have a voice and then showed me how to use it. And I can honestly say that I speak for the majority of the Bay Area's teen community. Charis's outreach is huge, and her impact is tremendous, and her message has been felt across the country. And I love you. I have to add that a college freshman jock fraternity brother style young man just referred to Charis as the clitoris of the Bay Area. The emotional clitoris of the Bay Area. Honestly, so this analogy could not be more correct. Charis is the nerve center for truthful information and trustworthy guidance for all of the teenagers across the Bay Area. And I trust and honor her more than anyone. And so when Charis last year, we were talking and she told me that this incredible author, Peggy Orenstein, had reached out to her to connect and share ideas, I knew that Peggy was a powder keg in this world of youth empowerment and social justice herself. And after reading her book, that was completely confirmed. Peggy hits all the nails right on the head and says it all. And as someone who's included in the demographic of the people she was researching and looking into, I feel so grateful that there's someone putting words to all of these issues that are pretty unspoken in my life and in all of our lives. And so I'm so honored to welcome these two unapologetic heroes. So I'd like to start it off with a question for you, Peggy. You say at the beginning of the book that a lot of the girls you interviewed, you felt a hunger from them to have this kind of conversation, to talk about healthy sexual relationships and this conversation in general. What do you think that hunger, that drive to sit down and connect tells us?
That we're not talking to girls. Mostly. I mean, wait a second. Debbie, Josh, the other people, there's chairs up here. We have the row of embarrassment. Yeah. You can do it. You can do it. You know, I sat down with about 70 girls altogether that were either college-bound or in college. And the girls that I talked to were, they span a pretty big ethnic range, but they were largely middle-class girls. And I talked to that demographic on purpose because I really wanted to talk to girls that we think of as having a lot of opportunity, and the girls that we think of as being the real beneficiaries of the feminist movement. Because if those girls who were, you know, ambitious and educated and forthright and political and articulate and, you know, leaning in all over the place were toppling in their personal lives, then it would be hard to deny that there was a problem. And there was such a disconnect between that advancement and that progress in the public realm and what was going on inside. So just as an example, one of the girls that I talked to, who was at that time a sophomore in Ivy League school, said, you know, I come from generations of strong women. My grandmother was a firecracker, and my mother's really strong, and my sister and I are really loud, and that's our feminine power. And then when we were talking about her sex life, she described as kind of handful of one-off hookups that were not very respectful, not very pleasurable, somewhat demeaning. And she said, I don't know, I think we girls are just socialized to be deferential and to not state our wants. And I said, wait a second, 5 minutes ago you told me what a strong young woman you were. And she kind of hemmed and hawed, and she said, yeah, you know, nobody told me that strong woman image also applied to sex.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting, and so much of what you just said comes back to what you say in the book about how, like, from such an early age, when labeling body parts even, we ignore female parts of pleasure, which is so interesting. It comes to make that this realm of our sex world just doesn't exist for women.
Right, it's the, what I call the psychological clitoridectomy. right? That when we have infants, parents tend to name all their baby boys' parts. At least they'll say, here's your pee-pee. You know, they'll say something. But with girls, we tend to go from navel to knees. And there's no better way to make something unspeakable than not to name it. And then they go into their puberty education classes, and unless they have Charis as a teacher, they learn about erections and ejaculations for boys. And for girls, they learn about periods and unwanted pregnancy. Not the same. And then, you know, you see that thing that looks like a steer head, that diagram, you know, and then it goes gray between the legs, right? And nobody says vulva, nobody says clitoris, and no surprise, fewer than half of girls 14 to 17 years old, 14 to 17 years old have ever masturbated. And then they go into their partnered encounters. And how can we reasonably expect that they will have a voice, that they will be able to self-advocate, that they will be able to state their needs, wants, desires, limits, and expect those, you know, it's not realistic. And what I in the book, I put it in terms of what Sarah McLachlan, no, I keep calling her that, it's Sarah McLachlan. Sarah McLachlan, I think.
She's a singer.
I fear I've done that on national TV.
She would appreciate that.
Yeah.
And she would
Okay, with Sarah McLachlan. Her name is Sarah McLachlan. At University of Michigan, she calls it intimate justice. And just, isn't that great? It's one of those like bing moments where, just like, you know, who does the dishes in your house, or who washes the floors, or anything, is partly a political issue, right? Sex, too. You have to ask questions like, you know, who is entitled to engage in an experience? Who's entitled to enjoy it? Who is the primary beneficiary of that experience? How does each partner define good enough? And those are really difficult questions for, you know, for adult women.
Absolutely.
But I think for girls, in their formative experience that they're going to be carrying forward with them, they're essential. And, you know, I think that we just don't want girls' early experiences to be something that they have to get over. I'm talking now.
No, I don't think
Yeah, totally. Wow, that's incredible. And I guess this next question is for both of you, Charis, Jen, whatever you want. So if this clitoridectomy, where female pleasure is not part of the equation, if that's so omnipresent, what can we do for both of you? What do you think we can do to teach young girls and young boys and young everyone that this should be part of the equation?
Well, what I did was follow Charis around and write about her and how she does it, so I'm going to give her
And what was so great was that Peggy really, I already was, there are so many books that are stupid. I know a lot of us, because we overread around parenting, that Peggy was on my top. I actually have a list for parent ed that says books that aren't stupid, and Peggy's at the top, so I actually thought that I was being punked when she emailed me. But the amount that she followed me for a year and a half, like at least a long.
I just like hanging out with you.
Yeah, it was great.
It was fun.
But the idea of her research is just so thorough, and so I was so honored that she really did follow my work and why and how I do stuff, and that was great. But there's a lot of synergy there. But I think that the problem that is so well articulated in the book is this idea that this demographic is really important to study, because, you know, I've been teaching in primarily independent schools. Finally now, Bush kind of knocked me out of the public schools for a while, and now I'm back. But just these incredibly articulate, intellectually assertive young women, like phenomenally articulate, 4.0 GPAs, ahead of the debate team. They're athletes, they're musicians. And the part that they're set up to believe that they then can navigate as young women in the world, and you come from a different place. They need the language to not defend their point, but defend their person and who they are. And so I just talked over and over again, the one constant in the last couple decades of my doing this work is that I speak to just this incredibly assertive young woman who is the head of the debate team, and as I say, you know, solving global warming on the weekends for community service. And but she'll say on Monday morning when we're sitting down, yeah, some dude's hand was on my leg at this party, and I just was like, I hope he has to pee soon or something. Like maybe he'll get up. Like this idea of saying to him, could you move that? That makes me uncomfortable. A completely different muscle. And then what does she do? She goes to shame. because she's just using her prefrontal cortex, which, by the way, is incredibly overrated. What she needs to do is honor what she's feeling in her amygdala and say, this doesn't feel safe, this doesn't feel right, and this idea of what I say is that I'm not, I didn't lie in bed when I was 10 and say, someday I'm going to be a sex educator. Like, I mean, that's weird for me. But I teach critical thinking, and I teach social justice, and I'm a youth advocate. And you can't teach those things if you aren't a sex educator in these times. And so I came in through the side door, and so this idea of stepping back and saying this isn't about sex, this idea of intimate justice was so exciting that Peggy really focuses on this, that it really is the giant canary in the coal mine. If we have this incredibly educated, fairly privileged population that's struggling with this, when we feel like we're giving them everything, we're obviously not giving them everything, right? And so where we come from, and Liv's question was so powerful, is that how do we approach this? We step back, and we don't start with the pregnant teenager. Right. And the formerly incarcerated youth, and the, I was pro-choice, but now I'm pro-life because I had a terrible abortion. It's like, can we not start with fear and terrible consequences and just step back, and this is just how do I move through my life trying to embrace joy rather than regret. And so I used to teach English, and it's the same, you reflect and revise. You don't walk into an English exam an essay exam saying, I wonder what novel this question's going to be about. And when I say that to the teens, from anywhere from the most elite schools, they say, well, it would be ridiculous. And I say, yeah, you would go from being a subject in your life to an object, right? In charge, powerless. But you'll walk into a situation on the weekend and you feel so paralyzed because there is so much judgment, as Peggy's book is so great at exposing. If you're going to be labeled no matter what move you do, that idea that she talks about of, usually the opposite of a positive is a negative, or a negative is a positive, and the opposite, a negative is another negative around girls' sexuality, that if I'm clear, then I'm a slut. If I go to a certain point with someone and I want to step back because that's my limit, then I'm a tease. And if I don't want anyone to touch my body parts or hook up, I'm a prude. And so this idea of that they just don't even want to think at all. But the idea is just like in everything else we're teaching them that they're getting so familiar with in the classroom, do that in your real life. Just anticipate. You don't have to decide what exactly the question is on the exam, but you would walk in with an idea of the landscape. You know the novel. You know the background. You know what your strengths and challenges are in situations like that, and then what would regret look like for me, and work backwards. And then, so most of my education, I don't start when people ask me to come in and do a workshop on affirmative consent. I don't do that right away. I say, first of all, no, if you let me bring youth, because do you really want a 50-something-year-old woman talking to, we need the people who have the new language, and so yes, we'll do it together, but also we need to do this work first. Let's not talk about sex until we talk, because young women think that they're being raised to talk, but they're not. They're being raised to talk from a very small part of their brain, which is not serving them.
Wow, yeah, I know that for me when that English essay analogy, when I first heard that from you, it really shook things up.
And you embraced it. Really
yeah,
well.
I mean, I'm working on it. It's an ongoing process. But you use the word object, and I know a lot in this whole progressive ether, and a lot in your book, the term self-objectification has been floating around a lot. How do you two think that we can negotiate this kind of debate or dilemma of young girls choosing to sexualize themselves and finding empowerment through sexualizing their bodies or their appearances as a form of empowerment?
Right.
Or is that empowerment, or is it actually just catering to male desire? And are we even in any position to say what's empowerment or what is not?
Is it limiting or liberating? Right.
Yeah.
Great question. I want to get to that in a second, but there's something that you said, Charis, that I want to get back to, which was ideas about joy and ideas about regret. And one of the pieces of research that I looked at that was really important to me was something that compared Dutch girls, Dutch college-age women and American college-age women, so similar demographics. and how they talked about their early sexual experiences. And they found that on every measure,